if I don't know, I might think if
Oh, you think?
I don't know, or I'm making that up.
Bring out some tape.
Cool. Whenever you're ready, let's trade out there. I've got,
Now, is that,
I'll stay where I am. Well, I'll actually get out of your way. If that works for you.
yeah.
Make sure you switch on name tag.
You have two other documents in there. One is this introduction slide, which you'll see in the beginning.
Right.
There is another document here, which is, I emailed everybody about. It's kind of the guide. Yeah. It doesn't be available during this discussions, but
We're just going to look at a video.
Right after you guys look at that video.
Okay.
right.
We'll look at it later. Or maybe I could.
Let's wait for Debbie. All right, let's get started. Then. Thanks everyone for being here today. And so we don't normally have meetings right after the budget approval, but I think folks felt like it'd be good to get together and look at some of these issues coming up for us at a work session. And I think we're also likely going to have another work session in 2 weeks from today. We'll talk a little bit about the agenda for that meeting today as well, and see what issues people might want to focus on. But why don't we just go around? This is a fairly small group. Let's go around. Let's just have everyone who's here just introduce yourself, say which department you're with, and then I'll turn it over to Mandy to review our tentative agenda. And then if there's other topics that people want to add, we can discuss that too. So I'll start off. I'm Brown Newman. I'm the chair of the county commission. So let's just go around this table and then we'll do the folks on the outside.
Before I represent District 1.
Robert Presley, I represent District 3, and Joe Belcher, District 3, his mother passed away, so he couldn't make it.
Ellen Frost, District 2.
Mike Farrar, District 2.
Got Grady, Information Technology.
Tim Flora, Finance.
Justin Clark, budget.
Mason, incredibly proud to lead
Lisa, incredibly proud to work for.
Diane Price, Budget Management Services.
John Creighton, Planning. Jim Holland with Health and Human Services.
Now,
He's incredibly honored too. That's right.
All right, and let's we'll start over here, and then we'll go to that. Do we
I said, you're crying.
Yeah, I got in on the celebration. I'm a Talent Pro Multimedia Specialist for governing body.
I'm Cassie Day. I'm a public relations coordinator for the governing body.
I'm Tom Van Slambrock. I'm just a citizen wanting to be informed.
Jerry Rice, your video man.
Eric Grell, Software Services Manager, Information Technology. My group manages all of our software systems, databases, websites, etc.
I'm Autumn Livers, Budget Management Services.
It's above budget management services. Karen Hardy, finance.
Mary Michelson, Health and Human Services.
Rachel Nygaard, in administration with the county.
And Mountain Express.
Matt Evans, budget analyst, budget management services.
Gigi Francis, library.
Pat Freeman, ID Bureau.
Ethan Artifacts, Steve Daggett, Extension Director. Mike Clemens, CBO.
Gary David, about the water.
All right, well, thank you all for being here. Thanks for all that you all do to help the county run smoothly every day. For citizens who are here, thanks for your interest in the county government. So I think we'll turn over to Andy Stone to walk us through what we've got on our agenda, and then to give Libby space to add additional things if there are other ideas that commissioners want to talk about today or our next work session.
So, Chairman and Commissioners, we want to begin by saying it is your agenda, and while we have offered up some topics and some timeframes, we will adjust based on your need. We will spend as much or little time as you want to spend on each of these topics. I want to make the point that Rachel and Mary are going to be capturing all day information, either things you share around ideas or questions or potential future topics, policy issues you want to come back to you. You can either just share those or write those on a sticky note that are in front of all of you all, and they'll get them from you and post them. And all of this, because we got that question from Mr. Rice, all of this will be posted on the web by tomorrow, including a reflection of the discussion today and all of the materials. We want to begin, I want to talk about, I've spent a lot of time listening the last 3 weeks and have heard a lot of consistencies from the governing board and from your management staff about how we move forward as an organization. And we've kind of captured those in these 4 points. Transparency. We really want to get better and better at full, complete access to information for you all and for citizens. We've heard that consistently. Timely, comprehensive, and accurate information that we're proactive in sharing as well as responding to specific requests from the public or you all. Accountability. Are we managing every day aligned with the priorities you set for us? Because that is your role, and the management of those priorities is our role. And this is probably more about me than these very senior managers, but as I make the transition, I need to own mistakes and be accountable for those and address those publicly, because we are learning as we go in some areas. Heard a lot of discussion both internally and from the community about diversity and equity. Within our own workforce, are we representative of the community that we represent? Are we intentionally bringing all elements of our community to the table and engaging them? And, are we effective in those efforts? And then, in addition to that, an area of interest for this board is do all the children in our community begin with an equitable start? Do families begin with an equitable start? Do neighborhoods begin with that? And if not, how do we impact that? And community engagement, probably in a broader scope than you've thought of it in the past, which is how do we help citizens have all those avenues to be meaningfully involved in our governance? And how do we provide for you the tools so you're interacting on a regular basis and able to update citizens on the work you're doing? So that's what I've heard across the board. We're going to start today with Dustin and Tim talking about one of the issues that came up a lot in the budget process, which is debt. But our purpose in that is twofold. It is to give an update on our debt status. It's also to show you a draft model of a dashboard on debt that would become something you had real-time access to look at any point and will be available to the public. You'll see it in a general debt picture, and then you'll see it in a project-specific picture, which is we took one of our major debt projects, which is the Human Service Complex at 40 Cox. That is just a sample, a model, so you tell us that we have the right information, do we have it in the order you need, and we'll make adjustments based on that and eventually build out all of our projects. And it will be the framework by which we will bring you any future requests to look at projects. After Dustin and Tim go through that, we're also going to identify policy issues as we move through it related to debt and things that you might want to change. One of the practices that came up in the budget process is we've always issued debt with the language that says the debt issuance could be for similar projects. I think you all need to make a policy decision. Do you want to continue that, or do you want any project that closes out the board to take action on any additional funds that are available, either to pay off debt or to reinvest in additional like projects? But that would take a policy change. We want to identify those policy issues, clearly not to act on today, but so we can go back and draft those policy changes, post them publicly, and bring them to you in a formal setting. So Rachel and Mary will be capturing all of that as we move forward. Then we'll move into community engagement, and Kathy Brady, your IT director, and Lisa will kind of walk you through a process, a tool that we've seen across the nation and other cities and counties that's really a way for you to talk about your priorities and the status of those priorities with the public. And how do we, as staff, help support you in that process? And the last thing we hope to get to today, and if we don't, that's fine, we can continue in the 25th. You just came out of the budget. What worked for you in that process? What didn't work for you? What information did you need you didn't have? What did you need more of or less of, or in a different format, or earlier or later? And after we hear that, we're going to bring you back a new proposed budget map for 19 and finalize that, which Diana will help lead at the next meeting to make sure we begin 18 with you fully engaged in the development of the 19 budget. And I think that, Justin and Tim are ready.
Okay, great. So, you know, since I've been finance director, I guess it's been now about 2.5 years, staff and I have always talked about how can we do a better job getting that financial information out in front of you, the commissioners, as well as out in the public. And we have our annual financial audit. We have, you know, our 275-page annual report, financial statements that, you know, is not very exciting and interesting. We do put together a publication. It's called the Popular Annual Financial Report, where we try to sort of make that information a little bit more user-friendly. But over the course of the last couple of years, we really have sort of had this discussion is how do we bring this information more to the public in a more understandable fashion, and in particular in regards to debt. How do we explain, you know, the whole debt process, what debt is, you know, what its impact is on the county government. And I know over the last several weeks we've had those discussions internally and amongst you as well. So what I want to get in front of you is a prototype, a tool that we can sort of help sort of a way that we can display this to the public. And what I will say is that this prototype really is something that we feel like not only would be used for debt, but it can be used for economic development, education, affordable housing, any kind of program that's out there, early childhood development, even the budget process. So I think staff has done a pretty amazing job. This is certainly not something that I have come up with. This really is sort of a collaborative process between our PR folks, our IT folks, and our budget and finance staff. So with that, I'm going to kind of hand it off to Dustin and sort of walk you through that process. Feel free to ask any questions. Like Mandy said, it's really sort of twofold. Part of it is we're going to educate you about debt, but we're also going to educate you about the tools that we have available to us to use for other programs as well. So questions about the debt are great. Questions about sort of the display. We're certainly open to discussions. This really is sort of draft. This information and while the information is mostly accurate, 99% accurate, just be aware that it is still sort of draft. We haven't vetted this. This really is sort of preliminary stuff that we hope to eventually get out there to the public. Probably we could do that within 30 days or so. But with that, I will hand it over to Dustin and let him walk you through.
Cool. So Mandy came to us and said, you know, for this session, she'd like to have 3 kind of concrete examples to review. You know, realizing their draft and, you know, there's work to be done, but, you know, we'd like to get something in front of you all that we could get some feedback on. So as you see these things, definitely let us know what you think, what your impressions are. So those 3 things were an overall picture of debt, a debt dashboard, so to speak, that would be accessible to you all whenever you'd like. Really drill in and see the status of debt, all the detail you might want, or break it out by the different functions and funds. And so we'll go through that. A specific project, so we'll show some details about the Human Services Campus as a template. And then debt affordability. And so the topic here would be, how does the county really know how much debt that's sustainable? How do we make decisions on, you know, are we okay? Is the debt we have affordable? And how our current policies translate there. So we're actually going to start here. We're going to talk about debt affordability first. And these tools also offer 3 different levels of information display. So this would be information presented with pretty decent context, but more summarized, so not quite as detailed as some of the other tools we look at. So, you know, debt affordability is kind of the term that's used when you're talking about the debt load that you have and if that's too burdensome for you. And so we'll look at that in 3 different ways. We'll compare it to other counties, we'll compare it to our policies. We'll also try to make a comparison to individuals as well, because that may make the sheet most relatable for folks. So, you know, our current debt load today is $406.8 billion, which is a large number. And so how do you put that number in context and as a citizen and as a policymaker? So one way would be to make a comparison to individual citizens. And if you've ever had a mortgage, the common way that debt is kind of evaluated is based on your income. So there's a debt to income ratio, how much debt you have compared to how much income you bring in. According to the census data, for the median Buncombe County household, it's about 32.2% of their annual income for that household is relegated to that mortgage debt. So how does that compare to the county? So for Buncombe County, about 9.4% of our annual revenue goes to paying off debt. So not a perfect comparison because governments people aren't the same, but it is a way to relate in terms that individuals are already familiar with. And so kind of moving on to another way we can compare debt would be versus other counties. So, and I should have led with this, any technical demo comes with glitches, it looks like we're seeing one right there. Apologize for that. So the first graph here is debt per capita. And so that would be, for these counties, the total debt they have divided by all of the residents of that county. And so we've got some similarly sized counties displayed here, way at the top, and Buncombe highlighted here in the middle. You can see that for every resident in Buncombe County, we have about $1,650 of debt for each resident. And you can see how that compares to our peers. Another way to compare would be debt to assessed value.
And Wake pretty big.
Yeah, I think Wake is the largest out of that group.
So that can burn down. But the counties like Guilford and stuff, aren't they closer to Buncombe?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm guessing they better ideas. That's where we're playing apples to apples instead of big.
So, absolutely. And so one of the things this ratio does is it takes that, that size into a factor, so you get to divide it out by the number of residents there. So debt to assessed value is another way we can look at this, and that would be how much the county is appraised at. So, the property tax base is set based on the value of all the different properties within the county. If you add that up, you get a total value. And if you take our debt and relate it to that value, you get a percentage. That just happens to be the first one of our policy measures, so since this graph is not displaying, I'm going to jump down here. Our assessed value is, our debt to assessed value is 1.12%. And so, what that, if our graph was showing, it would show us how that compares to other counties in North Carolina. I think we end up out of that list next to the bottom. So we'll get that working for you shortly. And so moving into the last section here, that would be, so how does our debt compare to our current policies? And the Board of Commissioners has already adopted some debt policies that we have to go by when we issue debt. The first one of those is that we have a policy that our debt cannot exceed 3% of our assessed value. And so you can see here, if we're at 1.12%, the end of this little dial would represent 3%. And so it gives you an idea of, based on this one policy, where we fall in that range.
And we'll note that we are conservative in our policy because the state does allow it to be 8% of assessed value, so.
That's true. Second policy here is debt service to expenditures. So another policy we have is that, this kind of goes back to the debt to income picture. So how much of our income, how much of what we're spending is dedicated to debt? So we have a policy that we can't exceed 18% of our expenditures based for debt. And our current ratio, based on the end of the fiscal year that just closed, is 9.3%. So that gives you an idea, once again, where we fall in relation to that policy. And then,
So if you look back over the years, has that ratio changed? Has it gone up? Has it gone down?
it's a great question, and that's something we could totally add to a view like this. And that's exactly the kind of feedback that we're looking for, absolutely.
I think in another slide somewhere where we sort of show you some of that trend, that's a great question, we can certainly get that.
I think especially because you have to govern around that, you didn't necessarily vote on or were involved. I mean, it's a part of the reality of the plate that comes in front of you, so we can distort the next office.
I suspect it's probably around that number, maybe a little bit lower.
We missed the rate cut before.
Do we have to pay the debt that the other commissioners voted for?
Sorry to shock you, but yeah.
That's what it is.
We didn't have to cut the ribbon either.
It makes you feel better when it's your ribbon.
Some of us are real.
Yeah, that's a great point, and we've got a lot of options here, so we may be able to link out from a display like this to see how did this look like over the last 10 years, or whatever trends that are interesting to you all, we can definitely provide. And so moving into the last
5 year.
5
Well,
year.
even 10 year, okay, would be better.
Yeah, I think that's
10 year.
right. I think that's a great idea for there, where we click on it and get training information for over a period of time. I think that's a really good idea.
Moving into this last of our 3 policy measures, we have a 10-year payout ratio, which is simply, out of all the debt that we currently have, how much of it will be paid off in 10 years? And so our policy is that at least 55% of the debt that we have today should be gone, should be paid off in 10 years. And if you measure the percentage that will be paid off in 10 years, right now it's about 66%, 65.9. So, we have to be above this 55% represented here by this line. The green area is good, so as long as we're in the green area, we're complying with that policy.
And that's inclusive of the county direct debt as well as the debt we take on for schools.
Yes, it is. So this includes, and all the numbers we've seen here include not only the general fund debt, which is, is paid from property taxes, but also education debt, which comes from sales tax.
Now, is that actually paying it out? That's not renegotiating, redoing it now. Is that actually paying it out in less than 10 years?
Yes.
Okay.
We're not getting a new credit card to low interest off.
Right. So if we go through a refunding, those terms have to stay with the same terms that we have. It's not like we can refinance debt and extend it out.
And those are your policies.
Right. These were the policies that I think you as a board, I forget, was it December? Maybe it might have been before the last, somewhere towards the end of this calendar year 16. We're at 17 now. I'm moving into another year, but so about seven months ago, this was the policy that we brought to you.
Does AV Tech count into this?
Yes. All of the debt, so it's economic development, education, any fund debt, all of that is factored into these measures, the measures for the policy.
Are we gonna get into the economic development debt?
We can, so we have an interactive dashboard, so when we get to there, we can actually, any kind of question you want, we should be able to walk you through that.
And maybe you're going to get to this, so that this does not include the debt that we're going to issue in the next 12 months or so, right?
It does not include that, right?
We are going to get to
But we are going to get to that, yes.
So that kind of walks through this one display here. Were there, outside of the big X with nothing, were there anything that was there anything? Yeah,
This is someone's really scary chart.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's unfortunate, because that was actually a pretty good measure for us.
So outside of that glitch, what do you think? I mean, is this understandable? Is this relatable to you? Is this clear? Or were there things that just aren't very clear that you might want to see? So I mean, we've already got some good feedback.
I'm just a couple of questions, and answers, but I'm bored. Feedback. It's kind of, things will change.
Absolutely. And that's a great point. As new thoughts occur and feedback comes in, we can update these tools.
And one of the things we recognized as we were going through this is that we have been so involved in this world that we sort of talk our language, and sometimes we forget that it's not a common language for everyone. So So if you do come across something that doesn't feel right, it's not that we're not trying to be not transparent, it's just that we're so used to it this way. In particular, I think one that, it took me years before I figured out really what a refunding was. Really all that is just a refinancing of debt.
Right, so this is all publicly accessible as well. So definitely clean up the glitch here, but you can get to this from anywhere that you have internet access. So not just from our network, but from any device, anywhere.
So maybe Kathy, who might send this out, has a link to you guys, and you'll see the URL says www.tests up there. So it's like a dev site. So I just want you guys to know that it is accessible outside the network, and we can get you a link to this. You guys can play around, especially when you see the dashboard that doesn't kind of show that's very drawable. So keep in mind it is a test site, so if you kind of start jumping around to other parts of it, you may see some works in progress.
So before I head away, any other conclusions on this one? All right, so that's one of three. We'll move into a debt dashboard view. This is more, so the prior tool we just looked at was trying to provide some context, maybe a little less detail, but more context. This is the opposite of that. So this is more detail, but a little less context. And so this may be a little intimidating at first. We're going to walk through the components here and make sure that everything's clear. And we're always available if you have questions now or later. So just keep that in mind. So I'm going to start off at the top. We've got some key numbers. These are all driven from our data on our debt. And so these would be live. They would be updated. And as the days go by, we take on any new debt or issue any changes. This will reflect those changes. Or make payments as we pay things off. So the first number up here is current debt amount. And that's as of today, $406.79 million. That's everything. That's our outstanding principal balance. So that's how we.
Does that add, remember it hasn't came into effect, the cost having anything in effect?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. However, as I think it's been alluded to already, it's an incomplete picture to talk about just the current debt that's issued today because we've already kind of obligated to issue some additional debt based on board actions that are already taken. So that's this number to the right. This is unissued obligations, which is a really fancy way of saying debt that we are planning to issue, we pretty much are committed to issue based on board actions already. And we can talk about what makes this up. The majority of that is school capital projects implemented. And the timing of that, when that will actually be issued, isn't really a known. So that depends on cash flows, when it makes the most sense. So it's not like all that will be issued this year. Most of it may be, all of it may be. Those decisions are just being made as we go through our
How that works is really, I mean, we could go out tomorrow and issue the debt, but we really don't want to issue debt until we really need that money. So we're working with our cash flows to make sure that if we can cash flow this as long as we can, the longer we can hold off actually issuing the debt, the more we save on interest savings, which is the more budget that you ought to make.
So I probably didn't answer this, but with the school, what's the mechanism? If that money comes from the sales tax, we borrow the money for the school, how is that paid back to the debt? Is that sales tax revenue?
So through the school capital fund commission, which we work, so we've got that, a separate fund, and we can drill into just that fund. So through that, I think the school capital commission fund has approved, I think, $72 million worth of projects over the course of the next 2 years. I mean, I think it was school year 18 and school year 19. Some of those projects, we really don't, some of those projects will not and cannot get started until later next year. So it's more than likely, we are not going to go after all $72 million of that the next time we do a debt issuance. We'll look at what we need for the next year, and if we can hold off for another year to get some of that. So it may be, of that $72 million, until we really get to the time we're going to issue the debt, which is likely probably in the winter or spring of next year. Until we get to that point, we won't know how much it is, but I anticipate it being around $50 million is what we'll actually go after debt.
So when the sales tax revenue comes in, where does that money go?
It goes, so Article 39
Mhm.
revenue will go into its own special fund. So
Okay.
it has its own fund that we manage, which we kind of go through
Right.
that graph
Right.
that shows how much. And so what we're doing is, so out of that fund, we're paying the debt service for education. So it's not coming out of the general
Right.
operating budget.
Yeah, and so I snuck down here as Tim was talking, I clicked on a button, and the button I clicked on was filter by fund, and I clicked on the school capital fund button. And what that does is it updates everything on the page to show just school capital stuff. So if we go back up to the top, current debt amount now is a lot lower than 406 million, it's 132, that's just school capital fund. We've got 72 million, like I mentioned, of kind of obligations that we will be issuing for this fund. And then you can see what the debt payments for this budget and next budget would be, just for the selections we made.
Right.
The 72 million, that's what School Capital Commission recommended, and then our board approved.
Right.
Yes.
Yes. I'm gonna clear that selection here. Go back to looking at everything. And so I just mentioned, we do have a picture of debt payments for this budget. That's based on, that's our debt service for everything that we've selected, so that's looking at everything. We have a payments for next budget. However, we got to caveat that number with, if we were to issue additional debt, like we've mentioned, then that number would change. However, it's hard to get, it's hard to really know what that number is until we make the decision on what the debt would be. So, based on today, that would be the budget number, but that's subject to change.
But I said let's go to the general fund, right? And look at the general fund, because I think really that's really where most of the budget issues are, that the tax, the ad valorem revenue is. So if we go to the general fund, so this, out of next year's general fund, we're gonna be paying $22.3 million on debt service. Next budget year is 21.75 without, that doesn't include the debt service for the $11 or $12 million worth of projects we've already obligated out of the general fund. Probably out of that, almost $12 million, we probably will go for most of that, which probably will add about another, $750,000 to $1 million to that debt service payment in next budget cycle, which is going to put it very close to what the budget payment is going to be out of this year. So
What was that made up of, the 11 million?
So there was the ERP, I think, is there a way we can illustrate that, right? So we actually have that. But it is our ERP and some IT equipment stuff, and I think there was a couple $1 million in.
That new computer deal with the budget tied into that? Or
Yes.
Payroll system?
Yep, that's the biggest, that is the biggest piece of that debt. And the courthouse exterior repairs, I think, which was just approved on the last CIP. And so yeah, they're right there, so we let them speak for themselves. Right, and I'm not sure what.
I think that got moved to a future year.
Okay. Okay, so actually then, that's what we're trying to get this system, actually dropped $1 million off of that, so there we go, we've saved $1 million already. So,
Thank you.
They're gonna move to FY19.
yeah, so,
This is excellent.
Yeah, it's
information.
really good. It's really good.
That's me.
And Kathy's gonna touch base for the end of the day, but all of this was noted you can access on your mobile device, but as you see more and more dashboards built out, we do think you might wanna think about how laptops, I mean, how much you're gonna use them and would you wanna see it. Seeing something on a mobile device and seeing something on a laptop can be different.
The one thing I see here goes back to something that I look at, the AV Tech, the 33 number, is, I'm trustee over there and I'm trying to watch the money in the buildings, just to see where we're at. That gives me an idea of when
And I think and for AV Tech, I think we've discussed different ways of dealing with the AV Tech fund to make sure that we are much more transparent with that and more accountable for it. And I think we had talked about maybe moving into a system where it is very much like the School Capital Fund Commission.
But voluntary and advisory versus legislative, that'd be you all's decision. Would you want a smaller group between a couple of trustees and a couple of commissioners, the two CFOs and Greg? And that'd be up to you all. That's a policy decision.
And what's the WIFIN one?
So the WIFIN PDF is the product development fund for the Reynolds Mountain development that was done back in 2008, something around that time.
or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's an economic development project. It sits in its own separate fund. Incremental tax revenue pays for the debt service on that.
I can't remember, but when you click on that, does it tell the year it was issued?
Uh,
Would y'all want to see that
Not right
added?
now, but I think when we get to the point where we're talking about the Cox building, that this very likely would be a project that we would do the same thing with, that we do with Cox, yes. Because we have a lot of that information already, it's just a matter of plugging it in and putting it out there.
So we have an issuance year.
Well, that was the refunding. So the original issuance, I think, was 2008. I'm pretty sure it was 2008.
Remember, it's longer than 14.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and that's, once again, speaking to just kind of the data issues, those refunding, essentially refinancings that occur, you know, they get difficult to track sometimes, so we're working on a way to make that clear and transparent, but that's a good example. So as you click on these different buttons to filter by, so if we wanted to click on human services, for instance, now we're just looking at human services. If I scroll down, and I didn't really talk about these, but over on the left we have debt by function. Let me clear this filter. So that's, you know, our debt as it divides out by education, general government, human services, public safety. You can see those different components, education being about 53% of the debt load that we have.
And the debt by function is how you adopt budgets, so that's consistent with the budgeting process.
We're also showing that same debt picture, so the same information, just splitting it out a different way, and this is by fund. So this is, you know, how this is all accounted for. You can see the AV Tech Fund and the School Capital Fund are broken out separately here, where those would both roll into the education function over on the left. So you get to see the percentages and the amounts by those divisions. If I click on human services and scroll down, now I've isolated everything to just human services. So what makes up that big debt total? And so if I scroll down, I can see the projects that have debt issued within that function. So the largest project being the Human Services Campus, $5 million or so. But all the other projects as well, kind of go down the line. There are some, like we mentioned, some refundings. It's difficult to name those in a friendly way. We're still working on that, but you get an idea of everything that makes up the numbers we're seeing. And if you scroll down a little further, this is the data itself. This is all the visuals we're seeing above come from kind of the number set we're looking at below. So trying to give maximum clarity there. Any questions about kind of the project level view of debt?
So where's that more historical piece? Are you getting to that first time?
Yep. So like Tim just mentioned, down here at the bottom, we start to give you, and let me unfilter by human services first before we go out there. Check this. Scroll down.
So did that building and everything it needed, now the furniture, the door, all that stuff?
Yes. We had a meeting about where we are in the project and what still needs to be done.
So about right.
Yes.
So one last chart here on this dashboard page. This is a look at 5 years in the past and 5 years in the future to try to give you some trending over time. So the black columns represent years that have closed, that have ended. This is information from our financial statements, so with the exception of the prior year here, which is still in the works. But this is the amount of debt we had when the fiscal year closed. And so moving forward, current year, 2018, moving forward. That's represented by this gray color here. That's the current debt that we've issued, where that total will be at the end of the year you're looking at. So for the end of 2018, current debt that we've issued will end at $377 million. However, we have to also think about those obligations. So that's what's popping up at the top. So if we issue everything that we have outstanding next or this fiscal year, that's $72 million for the school capital fund, and then $10 million for the general fund, that would take us up to this total, and then you can see as we pay all that debt off, how it goes down over time. This tries to give you some perspective on where we're at, where we've been, and where we will be based on the information that we have today.
Well, that's right. In this graph, if we don't have any other debt, as we go along, 2023, still over 135 million.
Yes.
But really more like 290.
Right.
Oh, I have that. Okay.
So, the biggest town, 13 schools, and
So from, well, that probably was the judicial complex. Probably was the big jump from 13 to 14, I suspect. And then 15, and then maybe tech, right.
And the school, all the
Look,
new
we said
schools.
three.
Big schools.
Isaac Jackson. We've had some pretty substantial major projects, judicial complex, schools, maybe tech.
so before 2013, was that what was that like 10 years earlier?
So, we can get that information, but I suspect one of the big ones was the detention center.
Yeah, parking deck, yeah.
Parking deck was before 2013, so there was the parking deck, there was the life safety tower, then I think before that there was the detention facility, then.
Two intermediate schools.
Right.
Two other intermediate schools. And just a hodgepodge of smaller projects, solid waste.
It might be good if you showed the previous years in a similar way that you showed the upcoming years where you had what was budgeted and then the on issue thing, just to see, to give you a better
Yeah.
sense of how that might have changed. To take, so you made those solid bars, but in 2013, there was a budgeted amount and then there was the unissued amount in that bar, right? Like, have the proportions stayed the same?
It's a great question. And one of the challenges that we deal with some of these tools is moving forward, we can capture this information in the ways that.
Might be a little bit
It's a little
harder
trickier.
to drill down to
You're
something.
basically holding what you have to measure.
Now, what we can do is we can get you a trend line, from 10 years back and show you where the debt was compared to, kind of going back to your point with the
Yeah.
previous slide. I think that's very easy to add trend information, because we have that, it's just a matter of.
And we can show you the projects as well that occurred in those years. That's no problem. But what wasn't issued in that year might be a little trickier. We can look at it.
Again, tell me if you're just going to already get into this, but one other question I have that's kind of related to this is how much debt service, how much does the annual debt service payment decline annually after 2018? If you assume, like, we don't take on any projects, which we probably will take those projects, but if we didn't, how much does the annual debt service payment decline in 2018?
So that's a good question, and we can actually make that calculation. I can tell you that. But it's.
Don't you have
There's
the
one
graph
there
for
that
the
shows
catalog
that.
at the top?
Yeah, so I like, but this is sort of like the top line number, if you add it all up, I'm just kind of curious if you, what's the total now?
Yeah, so we have kind of what the debt payment will be next year.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
When we get to the specific project, we're showing that payoff for that specific project. I think we could probably add that information overall as well. So that's some good feedback there. But I hear exactly what you're saying. Yes, we do have that information.
Yeah, I'm interested in that. I mean, I think there are going to be some other projects that we want to do. I mean, the library and a few others out there. But I mean, my current sense is that there's not other really large projects correct me if anybody has any ideas about it going forward. I'm not aware of any other really large projects, so I want to kind of understand that if we're focused on paying down the debt over the next few years, then how much money does that start to free up if we're not, taking on new substantial projects? Because, my sense is that we're going to have pressure on our budget from other directions, and so this is one place where we're actually kind of taking some pressure off, right? So, but how much is it?
And we can definitely develop those models. Now, whether or not we need that as a dashboard or whether we need it for a work session type stuff. But we can put it all on there. We have all the data. It's just a matter of putting it together, slicing and dicing how it would be useful to you. So that's an absolute.
And particularly as it relates to kind of the general obligations. I mean, the school, some of this dedicated sales tax is kind of different because I assume we keep investing in that. But in terms of just county direct projects.
Yeah.
That's kind of the link you all said you wanted the budget. I mean, we've always looked at that somewhat separate from budget, and you really want to know how's it going to play into the budget for the year and a half.
I think none of us like surprises, so the more we have those numbers.
I sort of sense that really it is the budget impact of what you're saying. You want this project, you want to know what impact that is going to be on the general fund budget or the property tax rate.
Yeah.
And as they pay off.
Yes.
Right.
And
Right, because annually, most things get more expensive every year, but this is actually one place where the trends should generally kind of be going more favorably towards over the next few years.
yes.
But next year, it's not really going to.
But not next, over the next few years.
The sense I get from the schools, the sense I get from Wanda, and from what I'm hearing is, we had sort of had it.
It's Mandy over it.
Well, Wanda, but Mandy now. Wanda before when we were having these discussions, and certainly now Mandy and John is. We've had a lot of infrastructure needs, and those needs really are sort of tapering off. We've got to, I guess we consider the detention center, but we've got that judicial complex, which was something we really absolutely had to do. The schools, I think we were at the point where we had to do something with the human services facility. So I sort of feel like the infrastructure now we're getting to the point where we shouldn't have any really major. It should just be. I think moving forward, it should be just maybe major maintenance,
And the library.
which is something we would have to.
Maybe
we will
keep
need to back
these. The library is keep these.
So I hear, budget outlook, impact outlook would be kind of a nice comparator for this information. How does this impact the budget over the future? So as this debt burns down, does that free up budget, and how much is that based on different scenarios, how much we currently have going?
And then how often do you pay on the debt service? Is it
So usually we have a big principal payment made, a principal and interest payment that is made in June, and then we make a smaller sort of payment in December, which I think is mostly just interest.
Interest twice a year and principal once a year.
And then really small, there may be a small interest payment somewhere along the way, but the biggest payment is in June, and then the smaller one in December.
And then, so when you factor in acquiring the debt, let's just say for the library, do you put the debt service in the cost of that building as well, or no? You know what I mean? Do you borrow, because I know in the past it seemed kind of murky, like there was a couple of projects.
So we don't borrow immediately for a specific project, we accumulate projects.
Right.
And so if you approve a library, you may approve the library, we might get started on the library project, but until we really sort of need the cash, I'm not gonna go after them.
No, but my question is, let's say a library is $2 million. Do you factor in what the debt service would be for
Yes.
that
I
library?
think she might be talking,
Yes.
are you talking about the capitalized?
Yeah.
interest like we do on
Yes.
top? So it's kind of been a management decision in the past, if you want to borrow money at the beginning
To capitalize.
to pay interest
So,
for the
right.
construction.
My philosophy is a little
period.
bit different. I'd assume not go after capitalized interest. I would just assume if we can cash flow it, wait till cash flow it till we really need
Right.
the debt. Because with capitalized interest, you're still that sort of increases your cost at some point.
Thank you, that was my question.
It moves,
seems like
right,
it
yes, it
sounds-
moves the payment out
Yeah.
further, but eventually you end up paying more.
You pay more for it.
Yeah,
Right,
it
absolutely.
doesn't sound like it's,
We'd like to avoid
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, our model moving forward really is try to cash flow it as long as possible.
Right. That's, yeah.
And for buildings, this kind of standard debt is like 15-year
Buildings
loan,
are 20 years.
15 or 20?
Yeah, so most of it is financed over 20 years. Software is usually about 5 years, equipment, depending on the equipment, is about 10 years.
And
So
vehicles, those are shorter.
Vehicles, 3 to 5,
Yeah.
5 at the most. I mean, a sheriff's patrol is usually, they're good for about 3 years.
We haven't financed for vehicles in many years.
Right,
You just pay.
You pay for vehicles.
right.
All right.
And I think fleet management was one, somebody mentioned as a work session, more drilled down information about how we budget for that and how we pay for that. So, were you at show pops as a project example? And it showed, look at that, things, what you would want to see in the future. If future projects came before you, does this capture the information you want to see, in addition to what you currently have?
So looking at a specific project here, this is the Human Services Campus, and this is pretty exciting. This is something that the IT team put together, which really connects the information about this project in what I think is a pretty friendly way. So up the top, we've got a panel with some information. This is kind of a title slide. Down at the bottom, you'll see these little flags, and it's maybe a little hard to see on the screen. I'm trying to get this to work out for us. There we go. But this is a timeline, and so each of these flags represents an event or a series of events that have occurred in the life of this project. So once again, this is a draft. We're working on making sure all this information is present, but we can see a description of the project, where this is, some of the highlights of the impact of this project, and kind of what it's doing for the community. And then as we move forward, we can get into some details. So, first off, through planning evaluation, a capital need is identified. This project is recognized as a need. There's some links to supporting documents. So if I click on this link, we'll get a supporting document about the business case for this addition, and some of the information there.
Try to build those thinking, it would be helpful to you all as you answer questions in public or citizens about a particular project.
We've got some other supporting documents that we can link to. So then we'll start moving forward through the life of this project. We can see that the date that was presented on the capital improvement plan. We can click on this link to go to the minutes from that meeting and see that information. Moving through, we can see the first budget report that included the project. We can click on this link and it'll open the budget report to the page where this was reported and included.
And what's interesting about this is most of this information was already out on our website. It just wasn't pulled together in a fashion that made it easy to sort of zero in on all the decisions that were made.
Absolutely, and so, like was said earlier, you have to consider some of the decisions that were made before maybe you came on board. And so this is a tool that would give you the ability to look through the timeline for projects that you might not be familiar with or may need additional information for, and it puts that information together all in one place. So now moving forward, we can see there was a capital planning retreat. We can view the presentation that was made at that retreat, and also view the minutes from that meeting as well. And then just skipping through, there was a resolution approved for the financing, so when, the approval.
Let's go back to let's actually look at that presentation later to show that. So again, this was a presentation that's already posted. It's somewhere on the website. You just have to know what date to go to. But here it is. So this was a presentation that was made. I believe this was made to the board as to the needs of the.
So you get to go back and see a snapshot in time of the information that was present and the decisions that were made and when they were made.
Some of that in response to some of the questions you had along the way, Commissioner Fryer, like on AgTech, exactly when do we approve it, what do we approve? So it'd be the ability to click and go immediately back to those meeting minutes and presentations for the week.
That works for me.
So just a couple more events here. Financing, a resolution for financing was approved. You can see the resolution and the meeting minutes. Capital projects ordinance adopted that had this project on it, pertaining to those items. And then we get into the construction phase. We can see the beginning and the completion estimate date there, represented by this block. And lastly, the debt repayment, so we can see when that starts and when that ends, and also see what the schedule is for repayment. So any important events about this project, we can pop up on a timeline. We can link out to the supporting documents. If there's anything that you would want to see that you don't see, definitely let us know. And then moving forward, this can be a model that we adopt for definitely major projects, but maybe potentially as just a standard for all projects. So any feedback you have, definitely appreciate it.
And maybe this is where we layer on then maybe the maintenance that will need to go onto this building as well. So we'll be able to tie the maintenance with the major maintenance that we have. So
Say that again.
So like, you build a building, after
Right.
you've got to maintain it 5 or 10 years. I think those some of the issues with AgTech we had as well as, what are some of the major maintenance? We would expect major maintenance to go on in, 5, 10, 15 years.
20 years, you don't need a roof.
Right.
Right.
So we would be able then to just sort of piggyback that onto this same sort of project. And so then we really sort of are able to get the whole history of the project.
This is great because, like, I know I was confused over how much gun range costs at the training center, so to be able to have all this out there, so there's no.
And the beauty of this is really, all this information is there. It's just now, let's just bring in all those pieces of the puzzle and putting the puzzle together so that it really is in one place and it's easy to understand. And Dustin and I were talking about this earlier. It really just sort of makes now our website a very historical site. I mean, we've become much more historically accurate, and we were developing our history of our organization.
So does it give you what you need, and is it what you want the public to see? Although Rachel's captured some of your comments this week.
I think what's really good about this is, it shows the due diligence that's done before we borrow any money.
Yeah. And I think what's good is it simplifies everything. We are making it transparent. But one thing I'll caution us on though is each time we fine tune it or we add something to it or whatever, let's not lose track of why we're doing this, to make it transparent for everybody.
Right.
Don't make it, I've seen with the best intentions, we
Right.
keep it transparent, but we make it so complicated, we
Right.
throw in so much
Right.
that we make it worse than it is.
And that's a good
So
point.
let's, let's be
We
careful.
don't want to overwhelm the
Right.
public with too much
Right.
information. We want to give them the information they need. And so we need to be careful with how we frame sort of the higher level view of it to make
Right.
sure that it's
Mhm.
very
That's
easy at the
my
front end, and then
concern.
you can drill down to it, but you got to
Yeah.
make that first page the.
I think the way it is pretty simple, it's straightforward.
It's getting better.
It's great.
Already.
It's a good job, yeah.
So one last little component here, just some details about kind of the debt related to this specific project. The idea here being, if you were at kind of an overview debt dashboard and you're looking at a specific project, maybe you can just click on that project and drill into a page like this and see some specific facts about the project. So we've got an estimated percentage complete based on the start and end dates that we have, how much of the budget for the project has been expended at this point in time. And then as the debt starts to be repaid, we'll see this number start ticking up, so that's complete. This is the debt repayment schedule, and so it kind of speaks to maybe something similar to this for all projects, but what would be current year debt service. And so current year, 4.7, that's 1.32 pennies out of our 53.9 tax rate. However, that's just debt service. That doesn't include the reimbursements for this debt service. So this is a unique project in that there's actually considerable reimbursement that comes back. We're working on building that into the model as well, so if you wanted a budget impact, that number is not the correct number for a budget impact. That's strictly debt service.
But when does that money? I think Mandy is like just maybe a couple of years before we start to see.
I think with Jim, right, we get, starting next year, we get some of that, but it's working out how much that is and getting that into a better model.
Yeah, it's based on the depreciation of the life of the building over 30 years. So we'll report that depreciation cost of the building over 30 years, and we'll get back about 25% of that depreciation expense each year for 30 years. So if it was 45 million, we get back over the life of it an estimated about $11,250,000.
So they're paying for a little over the bill in the process.
And we eventually plan to capture that, it just, those models really aren't really defined just yet, so. And this is very much the direction we were sort of heading with the School Capital Planning Commission. It's that sort of same concept. If this is a little bit more defined, I think this is probably actually a much better way of looking at it.
Yeah, and it's definitely that chart is great, the one on the bottom left, kind of that for the whole portfolio is sort of the key, the key data I'm still looking forward to seeing. This is terrific.
So we'll rework some of that and just show it to you quickly on the 25th. And any other policy issues around that, you want to make sure we at least capture to bring back to you for this discussion.
I guess the only other question I have is just, I mean, this is great. How much time does it take to kind of manage the dashboards? Because it's terrific, but like, is this, once you've kind of got the processes set up to kind of do this internally, is it a lot of additional work to kind of display it in this way? Because I want to be sensitive to how much we're putting you guys through to do this stuff too.
I'll speak to this, but what I will say, it does pull from active data, so it's not like, once we plug it in and we set it up, it is meant to be
just pulling
recurring, it's just pulling the information.
And it is the model by which we manage departments. I mean, we use dashboards for every service, for it really does. I mean, it's how we operate.
And so it's not like this really is a management tool for us as well. We use this on a pretty recurring basis.
And so it's not unique to what's being done.
No, and at any point, you can look at any of those
Right.
service areas. And the other point is, we want to get to a place where the public and the media has total access to
Right.
the information
Yeah.
without having to go through a form.
Right.
They see exactly what we see at any point.
And it's easier to do with one forward, probably harder to go back in time,
Right.
try to find all this data.
Yeah, so the debt data, the finance department has debt data at a very detailed level, and that's something they have to maintain as part of their job. So all we're doing is reaching into that existing data pool and showing it in a different way. For the timeline data, to Kathy's point, doing that, going back, that's a very difficult task. Doing it moving forward is something we can just build into our processes.
So is there something, that, maybe I missed it, but is there something the public could click onto and see on Inca Candler Intermediate School? So that will all be on here.
So they can do that
Yeah,
now.
okay, good.
Through the School Capital Fund Commission, they can see what their project is. Now, maybe not to this detail, but I think we are looking at, if this is what you like, this is certainly what we can implement for that as well.
I just think instead of just seeing that huge number of debt, what got us there?
Did you cover what you needed to on the 80 million approved but not yet issued debt, or what you were saying?
Did you have any questions in regards to, I mean, did we answer enough of that as far as that you've already obligated and how that would work? Well, again, yeah, sure.
And obligations, when we go out and borrow money, and we have the money left over in the obligations.
Yes.
And so I think Manny alluded to that, you're right, that was a question. So it's a policy decision, and so the way that most of our debt is structured is, if there are savings in a project, those savings can be used for similar projects, or they can be used to service, go back to pay off debt service. And so it becomes a decision of the board of how you would like to see that. And I think Diane and Mandy and I already had these discussions as to probably what we need to do is when we close a project, if there are savings in that project, it needs to get moved to a holding place, which becomes a decision for the board to decide what we do. Do we use it for a similar project, or do we use it to pay off debt service? I think that then becomes, we can make the policy such that if that's how you want to see it, we can absolutely do it that way.
But it goes back to what you was talking earlier. Vehicles, you said basically 5 years. But if we have a debt service that we have somewhere and we utilize that to buy vehicles, we're actually paying interest on the vehicles for 20 years.
Correct.
So that's what we need to look out for.
And
That's a good point.
yeah, you know, the gun range is the thing that sticks out in my mind. You know, what it was supposed to cost, what we borrowed, what happened, you know, John Boyd almost insisted that Cox came in under budget. So it shouldn't be gray areas, it should be kind of black and white.
We can certainly build, I mean, when we close a project, we could build into that project savings, and we could put it to whatever the board has decided to use those savings for. And I think that's, again, it's a policy decision, and I think we are certainly open to the direction you want to go. Take it.
So we've historically operated under the like project. I think we're saying to you, our understanding is we bring that back to you all and you would decide, is it about another project-like project? Is it about paying off the debt? That would be a public decision then.
And I think even when we did the like projects, I'm pretty sure most
Well,
of
they
those.
went in
usually-
under consent.
Yeah, they usually would end up in consent, right.
But I'd
So,
like to see that.
exactly.
We've heard that clearly.
And we have heard that
Also
clearly.
that,
I
yes.
mean,
And I
and
think
that's a whole nother process that we certainly look forward to
I think
discussing.
it's great when something comes in under budget, that's like, yeah, we celebrate, you know, but there's no celebrating.
Never even get it.
With us new commissioner, what I'm hearing is we come in under budget on the gun range or the three things in the last couple of years. Has that been normal over the past 5 years? And we borrowed more than what you were supposed to, is that normal? Like always, you need
So-
2 million, you borrowed 2.4, is that,
Yeah, so.
in the past, is that the way?
So it's interesting you say that, because that was a question I asked our financial advisors as well. Like, it seems like but that is a pretty normal, make sure that you are
It
covering
should
the
happen
cost.
that way, right? You should have some contingency,
Right, there should be
you know,
some-
spend it, and that's the
And-
way it should work, right?
You start out in the design, or I guess you start out in the, okay, you got an idea, put a number together in that. And as the project goes on, that contingency gets tighter and tighter, but it's still, there's unforeseen.
Like, it doesn't always work that way, like,
It doesn't always
I think
work that
that's
way.
a landfill, like,
Yeah, but
you know, sometimes it goes the other direction.
yeah, the last thing I really want to do is come back and say, I need $2 million, because we
Right.
budgeted.
No, I agree with all that, but when it's under budget, I think, you know.
Well, and I think if you use Cox as an example, John was speaking to the construction costs, and they got quoted in the media, that, you know, for us, you have to have IT built into any
Right.
building, that's
Right.
part of what we borrow for, and for, be that, like in Cox, that they
Right.
build out of cubicles.
Right.
Because they don't really have furniture, it's a cubicle environment. Those things weren't necessarily what John was speaking to on Cox, but it's interpreted as the projects under budget, just all those other components that have to be addressed. But I hear y'all saying, see the detail of it.
And so if we're going to a process where typically you're gonna get a construction loan and a permanent loan for a big project, but for a big project like Cox Avenue, if it's, you know, let's say $40 million, but it does come in under budget, does that mean that you would actually, would they adjust the final permanent debt based on the actual cost, or again, you would borrow it, but then you would pay down that savings right at the beginning, and the people we borrow money from, allow us to pay down debt without a penalty? Is that, I mean, we wouldn't, I mean, because it sounds good, but are there reasons to not do that?
And do you remember what we use that sort of, yeah.
What now?
Not always, often there's a period when you can hire that, but it's not immediate. So it's early in the issue for that effect, may not be immediate, set aside, that information would be what you consider.
So I'm sorry.
So you can't always prepay at any point in time.
Yeah, because I think it sounds nice to say, oh, let's pay it down, but is that always practical?
Right, and so
to do?
when we pay it down, yeah, it sort of sets sort of like an escrow. And we're paying it down from escrow.
Okay.
But we're still paying, we're making regular payments for that. So it's not like we can just, we have $5 million, we can't just reduce the debt $5 million. It usually goes in escrow, we'll pay through those payments when we are required to make the payments.
And I'm starting to get so much in the weeds, but these are some of the questions that
Yeah.
kind of we get asked and
Yeah.
where's that money? It's like,
Right.
so just trying to figure out how to answer that accurately is not
Absolutely,
always easy.
absolutely.
It's like this, it's like one, well, I look at it, so for one of your own, it's very reasonable, right? Doesn't matter, whatever. These people are not on bond anymore, you pay it off in 6 months. Because they want to know that period, because their interest rates split, so that's how come you're stuck with your period.
You know, we're going to the market, and so we're issuing debt over 20 years. And so while the total interest cost may be 3%, it depends upon where those bondholders are buying those bonds. They're getting different interest rates depending upon where they're at. So the bondholder wants to hang on to their piece, and they want to get their,
Get what they best.
what they invest in. Correct. Absolutely.
What we hear that it's ultimately a board decision, you want to be a public, open process that makes business. We're clear on that. Anything else on that? That's the chair, you want to break? Good, or tell us?
I think this is great, so thanks for bringing us together, just spending this, in that discussion about this kind of stuff. So I think we're ready.
Lisa, Kev, you're open. If you want to break while they set up, we can do that, whatever works for you.
I would take a break, I'm fine. Keep going.
Everywhere.
Or just keep going, if people need to step out, go to restroom or something, just do that.
What do you need? Ready?
So, when Mandy had those, 4 principles up there that were kind of the foundations for how we're moving forward, which was about transparency, accountability, diversity and equity, and community engagement. The piece that we're going to talk about next is really this concept of community engagement. How do we help support a conversation with the community and board of commissioners? One of the things that really struck me at the board meeting that I came to when we presented and we had the young kids come, we did the documentary, was Commissioner Presley coming up afterwards and saying this is what county government is all about, having a packed room full of people who are having spirited discussion and who are actively engaged in the future they want to create for the community. So partly what we want to do is create a platform for the community, which is an invitation to the community for how they can get involved. When we talk about HR, a lot of times we talk about how important employee engagement is because it's the more employee engagement you have, the greater your capital because it's the horsepower that allows you to do more and more people are giving. And likewise, we're kind of looking to say to our community, we have this untapped potential in many ways that if we can harness people's aspirations and their desires to make the community better and do that in a way that's effective, then we have a whole lot more capital in our community to move for the future that we want. So the websites that we're going to look at 2 of them. One is from Jackson, Mississippi, and the other is from Louisville, Kentucky. And they're just ways that allow citizens to connect with shared aspirations that we hold as a community and to really connect the dots to how they can contribute. So we'd like to go through that with you and then break into a small group by district and kind of talk through a little bit about your current challenges within districts, your current aspirations, both within districts and countywide, and see then if we can come back to you again with an outward-facing website that would allow us to engage with the community over the web, in addition to things that we'll be doing as far as meetings and other, like coffee, the Jasmine and the White Side's coffees that they're doing and things like that. So we
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
So, to share with the other commissioners, Al and I have the experience of going on the site visit for the Isaac Coleman grants. And to me, that embodies what we're talking about. I mean, we've all long said how we want everybody to have a seat at the table. And I don't feel like a lot of citizens in our community feel like they do. So the job that Lisa did and Rachel, and everybody did, making everybody feel like they had a seat at the table. Not only did they have a seat at the table, they were working hard to get these grants. And so, for me, it was a highlight as a commissioner to go out on the site visits and see communities invested, not having their hands out on what they were going to do, but it was because Lisa gave them tools to do that.
And it's interesting, it's already paying off. So one of the Isaac Coleman grants that we funded was United Community Development. We've had a spike in violence in the Erskine South Side area, which is right across from the Eddington Center, which is an area where we've made so much progress, and yet we're having this violence. And United Community Development has already gotten out on their own, self-organized enough that they're holding a town meeting at the Eddington Center next Tuesday to have the community say, how can we help to stop this violence? So you can see where harnessing that capital allows us to be much more effective as we move forward versus us just pedaling as hard as we can in county government and not having that traction.
Kathy kind of keeps that up. I'd say too that if you go to the county website, you can drill down to departments and see a lot of data about the core services we deliver. This is more about those aspirations you have that you fund and you want to see investments in that are kind of outside of that, and how do we share information with the public about those, and how do we give you a platform for the public to engage back with you, whether that's doing work in Johnson Lee Review, or whether that's on sustainability, or whether that's on domestic violence, and how do we capture that? And although we one of these is a city, maybe they might have this, you get a flavor for the intent of what this kind of tool will do.
I brought my glasses up, thinking I could look over there. It's not gonna happen, so if I turn my head away from you, I apologize. Just to revisit where we are right now, BuncombeCounty.org is our current primary tool for communicating information to the public. And we do present a lot of data through this site. On the home site, we have GIS and tax. Tax is our most visited sub-site. We present a lot of data there. Lawyers and real estate agents love it. We have deeds here. We have data all throughout the site, restaurant inspections and safety information, but it's almost like you have to understand the board structure of the county to find that data. So one thing we did recently was we built a tool called Discover Buncombe, and the goal was to break down those silos, pull the data together from a citizen-centric perspective from where somebody lives. And it's all we're talking about is getting things in front of people from a point of view that makes sense to them. I'm going to show you, this tool is out there, and I can start typing in my address. And it's smart, responsive, and it quickly pulls up things that are relevant. And right here, it presents to me information about my site. My house, there's my property value. I can look and see, where is my library? Okay, here's my library, here are my schools. We put out on the site a feedback form asking people for feedback, and they did comment that they wanted more information on the types of schools, and so we have links out here. We have crime data. You can see my little street and a half-mile radius of the crime, and I can click on a link and it pops it up for me as to what that particular event was. So this is a tool. If you haven't played with this, it's at discover.buncombecounty.org. The goal was to give citizens a tool. It's meant to be something that's not static. We will keep building on it. The election cycle is about to start. We're going to add things here for who are my representatives, where do I vote, and continue to add the data that's filtered throughout the site. Restaurants that are near me or things like that. But it does have a very specific perspective. It's about me and where I am. It's a mobile tool, so if I happen to be in West Asheville, it has the ability to know where I am. And if I'm driving around and say I want to drop some books off, I know where that library is. It can tell me that too. So this is a recent effort we've made to try to pull that data together and then communicate with each other with some information that's useful to them. So as we talk about that, Jackson, Mississippi does participate in the Sunlight Foundation's Open Data Cities program. And they have developed this site that, what they've done is they've grouped data by aspirations. We are vibrant. We are connected. We are prosperous. We are innovative and we are committed. Each one of these blocks, they've put into the block sort of a program name. They've got metrics, goals, statuses. We've met this, we've achieved it, we're measuring it. We didn't meet it. It's an interesting way, if you look at other open data portals, other participants in the same program, they just present data. This city is attempting to frame a message around the data. And what does this data mean to you? The city leaders spent some time defining some aspirations, defining what data fits into those aspirations, and grouped it in this way. So that's kind of why we're looking at this site.
So if you were to,
Yeah.
early childhood literacy,
Right. So if you click on the detail, it takes you to another page. And then they explain a little bit about it. So they have a goal, increase literacy scores. They have implemented Project Read, so there's a program behind some of these things. It's not just data. It's explained in a very interesting way. They have some statistics. They have individual scores. They frequently have further information around the project. They have a map about the center locations. So they went way beyond just saying, here's a set of data, here's a set of data. They really framed a message around it. And a lot of it has to do with what that city leadership wanted to inform the public about. Yeah. So that's one example there. Another example that we thought was useful for you to look at on this site
Saturdays used to be for college
was super neighborhoods. They have a super neighborhoods initiative, and this kind of ties into some of the information you have in front of you around the communities, recognizing how do we encourage community engagement. They have a program where they created super neighborhoods, and they didn't just track the creation of the neighborhoods. They have information about the fact that they created a council for each neighborhood, and they have meetings, and there's a whole initiative behind it.
This is similar like one of the Isaac Coleman grants that we had was for the Pearson project where we had 3 neighborhoods that wanted to create a neighborhood plan. So again, this is engaging with the community in a way to say, how do we for greater civic engagement within our neighborhoods, and then tracking that.
Another example, this is a second, we'll give you these links because this is just interesting to look through and get some ideas. They have business development here. And to get to business development again. So they wanted to increase licensing, basically. Sounds like a simple thing, but then when you go down, they talk about their economic development program. And as you look at that, you can see they have programs for recruitment and retention, minority business enterprise certification programs. It's a lot more than just kind of setting a goal and tracking it. They really are relating it to the programs they have in place. They also had an initiative around transparency. So we are innovative. They did not make your part on transparency. But it's interesting to look at. And what was interesting about it was they set a goal, and beyond setting the goal of we're just going to get data out there, they created a program which had a performance management concepts. They created a governance committee, a committee of 9 members who evaluated what data do we want to share with the public, how do we get it out there, how do we ensure it has quality and explanations behind it. So the point we're showing here is they put a lot of effort into this. They really define what they're trying to share with the public in this effort.
And create a roadmap as well for how the things you're measuring, how they map to the things that you define are important to the community. And then giving people opportunities to know how they can contribute to that.
So that was a very interesting site that we found. Another one, which is more about citizen engagement, is the One Love Louisville site. And they've created basically a central portal to encourage community engagement. This is specifically around reducing violence in the community. But this provides a resource for citizens, and you can approach it from the perspective of faith or business or citizen or one or more. Each one of these portals provides resources for the public on how to get engaged. This is what's related to enforcement, intervention, prevention, mobilization, and then there are links. They've created programs around working groups and ambassadorships to be involved in this. This represents a different form. It's not just about data. It's about how the community can become engaged with county city management there to really work towards an effort, much like the Isaac effort that we talked about. So we looked at buncombecounty.org, and yet beyond department level, kind of saying, here's some data to share, we're really looking for an overarching guidance at a level above that to say what data is important to share with the public, how do we present that, how do we engage with the public, what tools do we want in place to get feedback. A website is stagnant very quickly, and you really need citizens to tell you how useful information is. We do Google Analytics, we're always watching who's coming to what sites and what's getting used. That's an important tool, but that's not speaking to the public directly about what is useful to them.
I know for either of the communities, whether there were mechanisms for community input into the kind of data or the platform look like, or the emphasis on it. So there was sort of that bridging of the digital and real organized activities.
Jackson definitely had focus groups to talk about it, to create even some of the aspirations that went into framing that message, and definitely community engagement and data.
Louisville's done a lot of the same neighborhood work we're doing. We've been pretty closely aligned with them, and they've done that in that same fashion. They gather what is citizens concerned about.
That website makes sense, exactly.
So to your point, like the website just doesn't happen, like that partly what we have to do is.
So we have the talent. Just really put that together. That's good information I'm looking at. This is a different thing than Brian called dollars and cents. I love what I'm seeing. We have people stay in that community, whatever. Feel what you think is good for us. Concrete, numbers like you go to certain Andy, Diane, Old Street, certain. This is something me personally, I think we need to look at y'all to have an idea about that for us, on the issue of this. Because some of it's related to what I see every time, first we do something.
And that's, I think, what we're going to talk about more in the small group discussions is, these are just some ideas, just a couple examples to give to you guys, but then I think we're going to talk through in detail a little bit more. What do you want to see as representatives?
So you could take something like miles of motocross bike trails that for community that's really important, and then you can have like outdoor activities that like.
We don't drive that motocross down that hill, maybe.
I think to the chairman's point, it's about data we already have, whether it's in the community health assessment, whether it's in the work y'all directed us to do around the opioid epidemic, whether it's about Isaac Coleman or pre-K. But what do you want, what would you want that to look like as a tool out to the community, one place they can pull those projects out?
So you can have a whole portal around opioid-related issues and how people can access treatment and services and what's being done.
Actually have parts of that already out, but we haven't collapsed them in a single page that's got the communication.
And it being like
do with what you were saying, find out what citizens want access to, what they want to find out.
I think that's the same thing every time. Ellen and myself in District 2, which is pictures. And then even tied Molly into it, because some of his area and Joe's area are tied to our district. So some of us can get out and separations in those districts. Talk to some of the people.
Coming from the finance guy, what I like about this, it really is about what is a taxpayer's return on investment. And so this is one, it's engaging the community, but it's also helping the community understand, I'm invested in this county through my tax dollars, and what am I getting in return? I think this is a great mechanism, so showing the public really what their tax dollars are sort of are buying for them and their community.
Way to blend information with resources for the citizens.
So an example that came up for us is Taylor reached out, just an email to one of the commissioners who sent it on that said, we're looking at building a community center. You know anything about unique to the Cameron community? Well, Mary built that profile because we had all the data somewhere. It wasn't labor intensive for us. So then we talked about how we build one for every, those are some of what you have in front of you for all communities across the county. That's what we're talking about. Not new resources as much as things we already map and have available, but how do we maybe share them in a more coordinated way.
And I think the other layer on top of that is how do we get engagement? So when you're talking about the opioid epidemic, there are things that every citizen in this community can do. They can be a better consumer when they go to their doctor and ask questions about pain management. They can clean out their medicine cabinet. They can know what the signs and symptoms are. So it's a more of a two-way discussion as well, that gathering information we already have, putting it in a way that makes sense as it relates to the priorities that you all have, that you mine from the community, as well as really helping to create a partnership with the community, working toward those goals that we have. So I think it's all of that. So we were going to break into the districts to kind of just look through your data and your community profile and talk through the things that you've already heard from communities as you've been out there. What kind of emerged for you? What would you want to see? When you look at that website and you go to Jackson, Mississippi, it's inspiring to see the things that they're saying, here's what we're committed to, and then having a clear pathway to understanding whether or not you're on target for meeting those. So if we were going to build something similar like that, what are some of the things you would want to see? That's what we want to do in a smaller discussion. And then we'll just take that information and come back, not next month, but probably a month after that, with a mock-up of a few different versions of that website and let you see if that meets your needs or not. Does that sound like a good plan? Okay. All right, so Rachel and Mary are going to work with District 2 and 3. You guys are going to be together, and I'm going to work with District 1. And we're just going to break out for a short, small group session. If you want to take a bathroom break, that's great. It's really about educational achievement and jail diversion programs.
Really? Wow.
So part of what we tried to do in the small groups was to get kind of at the aspirational pieces of this commission. Jasmine was talking about the One Louisville site and the campaign for safe and healthy neighborhoods that encourages civic engagement, promotes collaboration, and facilitates community-led action plans, which again is another aspect of this. We were looking at the data across our county, and there are areas in our county where there is severe poverty. If we can bring people together in those neighborhoods, we can craft better solutions for people out in Leicester, Chandler, or Burnsville who need help with those things. Exactly. So, is there a particular area in here, Jasmine, that you'd like us to look at that?
I just thought the platform was, as you scroll from top to bottom, just in terms of thinking like how, rather than sort of super dense from the start, it just is kind of a campaign-driven model of community engagement that helps people. And this campaign is about homicide, suicide, and addiction, and overdose deaths. So it kind of, and they've done all this, seems like they've done all this community work to develop specific priorities, but also strategies. But it kind of has this interesting umbrella model towards fatalities that you don't instead of seeing the fragment. So it's kind of interesting.
So we could have one in our community that would be around early childhood development and education, opioid crisis, creating a green, sustainable environment, or whatever you want. And then again, kind of a call to action for people within their communities, how they can connect to that. So part of what, so as far as those platforms, is that worth something worth us pursuing in creating that kind of interface with the community? Do you see that as something that would be helpful? Yes, yes, other people? Yes, no?
Yes.
Again, using existing data that we have, so we're not constantly rebuilding things, but maybe collecting and organizing that in ways that, again, tells a story, a narrative. Part of what we wanted to do was to hear from you about kind of what are the we are things that we are. So we're accessible and open, we're exclusive and have participation. We make a difference in the quality of life for all of our citizens. We're a community who cares about all of our citizens and their quality of life. We've reduced energy. We've reduced energy waste in county facilities and clean energy generation, increased minority business ownership, be proud, improved employment in neighborhoods with high poverty. We are ready. Every child deserves an equal opportunity to thrive, creating real impact to help Buncombe kids thrive. Reduce childhood poverty, reduce infant mortality, reduce childhood hunger, increase access to pre-K, increase in kids achieving post-high school goals. Did you guys see the thing recently in Chicago where they made kids have goals in order to graduate from high school?
Yes.
Yeah. We believe in citizen and community leadership, more face-to-face contact between community leaders and Buncombe County officials, making a positive impact on the quality of life for all of our citizens. The opinions of all of our citizens are important. So how do we embrace these aspirations as well as tapping into leadership and efforts, not all just county-led, but county-defined projects and priorities? These are more the nuts and bolts about the pages, easy searching, strategic partnerships, efforts led by community partners and grant recipients. Can we showcase those on the website and connect that to the things that we hope for our community? Workforce, connect to the job openings broader than Buncombe County. Link and connect to representatives for each district and for the whole community. Ways to find help, make sure that we become a resource grid for the community. Building opportunities for citizens' participation through libraries, park and recs, and community events. Resources for children in pre-K. Integrate community profiles into the website and the profiles, so like you can kind of quickly go into another community site depending on what you're interested in. So for opioid, it might be you go to Sunrise Recovery, you get to that website easily. Connectivity to resources between areas of the county and the neighborhoods. Parks, trails, parkway access, maps and information about places. I read an article this week where there's physicians in a community that literally write a prescription for kids to do exercise in the park and recs area, where they've set it up so that kids have like trails and things that they can go and help with their health. So there's all sorts of ways that we could integrate these to match the things that you all have set are priorities for you. I encourage you, if you have other ideas about that, to email me with those ideas and we can work with the team to help develop that in a website format and kind of come back with some ideas about that. We'll look at the Louisville One website as well as far as just, again, platforms.
What's the current traffic to the site then?
To our side?
Yeah, the current site.
It's a little more.
It's about 300,000. It's
Huh.
I have to look at it. We track that.
Could we look at the number of unique visitors?
Yeah.
Or that was 300,000
Yeah,
unique
it's
visitors?
roughly one per citizen.
Pretty nice.
Is it
I think
mostly-
it's, I think there are a lot of citizens who don't access our site.
Sure.
So
Right.
it's,
I have,
As
I mean,
it like.
yeah.
What group does that come? You say 300,000, how many of them are from the legal profession?
That's
Right,
hard for us
so
to tell.
that is a large number.
Yeah.
The tax site has a huge population of professionals. We have to weed that out.
So there are over like 5,000 searches on the tax website a day.
so I have a question for Cassie. When you were at LOS, like, in selling ads and stuff, so what would be like a typical, like, what would be a success for how many, you know what I'm saying?
I don't know that. Yeah. I could try to find out.
Because I know they drive a lot of, like those new products, new ads and stuff, how often those get started.
Yeah, that was, I really wasn't involved in
Right.
that side, so. I mean, like, what would be a successful,
Right.
campaign or
Yeah,
successful
like what makes
audience.
campaigns easy, because that's what we want, is easy.
Yeah.
So, was there anything in particular that you really liked about either one of those websites or this website that you say, wow, we really want to make sure we have that? Or,
I like the Jackson one, because it really showed community, aspirations and the fact that, community members did that, they were going to want, saying,
Well, right.
Robert, is anything for your area, your like district too that you're interested in? I know you've been really busy in the Johnson Review area.
Chandler, there, you was talking of District 3, we got the parkway that we would pay, the bicycle trails, there are like 1,100 bikes a day going through Big Bridge and up on it.
Make sure we reflect some aspect of that as well. Okay.
You know, there's a lot of different things, and I think that the website currently does a great job of just getting information out about it, just goings on, just things that we'll be interested in, just getting in. But I'd like, if there are particular things that, because there's some things that we can do just by
right.
voting on a policy or voting to fund something, But then there's some of the things that we can't really just do by taking government action. We actually need the citizens to be involved. So I think we, when there's different initiatives that particularly need public involvement, it's nice to share information for the sake of getting out there, but then in some cases we just really, really need it. So we should sort of think about our different initiatives and which ones we can use our media tools to really help try to really advance.
Just like that. What you're saying, when Ellen and myself first came on, we got $50,000 for the restaurant. And $700,000 worth of stuff out there now. It didn't cost the city anything. People stepped up, basically. A lot of them came in, they worked for free, a lot of them donated. That's the way you do it, instead of just saying, let's dump money.
300,000 is pretty amazing. I'd be curious what other websites in the community get more than that. I'm sure the city gets a lot. I'm sure the tourism stuff gets a lot. But it's probably one of the higher rates in the community, right? So it is a valuable tool.
Actually, talking to Jackson and Leland about their traffic and how successful are they. We're looking at it saying this looks nice, but you can have conversations.
If you go to the Jackson website, they actually have one of those things that pops up and you can talk, chat with somebody on the website in real time.
Everyone started doing that accidentally.
I think we have a lot of really poor people throughout the whole county that it's not even in their database, but they can get on a website and it will be helped. And I think to me, that's what's incumbent on us to reach them somehow. And I know in different communities or in community leaders do low cost lunches around the whole county. We can tap into that there's so many people that live in our county that live in isolation and poverty.
Well, that's the bridge between, digital is a tool that
Right.
amplifies and reinforces, but the real-time relational
Right.
piece that I think more opportunity for us to be in those community settings, listening, sharing is that.
Well, but how do they know we're coming? And how do they know that they have a seat at the table? They'll reach out to existing community leaders who are doing things for the poor and for the
I will tell you, the data on the health and human service side suggests that a high percentage of them use tax, use funds for setting appointments, information, study.
Okay.
which is probably a higher degree of that access than you think about.
Do we have a text alert system? How's that currently used?
We have both a text alert system and a phone alert system, a call, which will call mobile phones. We use it for, Jimmy might want to speak to some of that, but everything from reminders of have you done your food stamp recertification so you don't lose benefits, to flu vaccines, it's time to do, it's flu season, to talk about
Opting into outreach efforts, like if they have food assistance and they're eligible for
Yep.
it, making them eligible, making them aware of those things. One of the things about people that have those limited plans is you have to be really careful, because if you do text them, it costs them.
Right.
And so you have to be aware of that, and really having
Yeah.
people opt in versus
Right.
just
Right.
reaching out to them specifically, because it does cost.
So Commissioner Cross' point, I think that too, if we can land on something like this, that when you go out in the community and you're talking, you have a focus that you can rally people around so that they're really understanding, again, what the focus is, and then there's data that you can pull easily and take when you go out to those conversations. So I think that there's the web platform, and then there is also just clarity in that message as you're going out.
So what is, like, if you did super neighborhood?
That was the one where there was a neighborhood initiative by the mayor to create these neighborhood associations, and so they were looking to have 10 associations developed over a year's time. I think it was a year. And then it goes down and explains what those super neighborhoods are. I think the East Engagement one, I thought that one was really good too, the back one. He's involved, and I thought that was a really rich one when you think about, they wanted to show educational health, wellness, career readiness, social and emotional support through city-sponsored initiatives and partnerships, and if you go down, they really had a lot of different initiatives for involving youth in ways. I Need You to Make It was the big youth initiative that they had, which showed this investment in the youth in their communities, which I think is really fantastic. And then they had all these different businesses that were brought on board to help with the youth as well. And then these specific, like Parks and Recreations host a number of youth and family-friendly programs and activities throughout the year. Public Works provides several environmental programs throughout the year and will host first youth engineering week this year. So again, specific ways that they interact with youth in their communities.
Great.
Yeah.
I think you all have a lot of those investments that you fund, and we scheduled a couple of them under county manager's report, second week in August. But that's another vehicle that really hasn't been used much, is the county manager's report on the board agenda for targeted presentations around areas of interest.
And kind of going back to Commissioner Newman's idea as far as like, how do we bring businesses in a way that allows them to, one thing about citizens, but are we really harnessing businesses in our community in a way where it's not always money driven, but it can be ways that they help sponsor youth or sponsor neighborhoods in a way that is different, but is engagement, not necessarily in a monetary way. So.
Yeah, and
I like to see the engagement, monetary instead of engagement.
Right.
another, in job opportunities. So one of the things that just always struck me is, Nathan's presentations and maybe just reputation for there's not any good jobs out there, but there's actually employers have good jobs and they can't find employees. There's like, how do we get the word out more about the good jobs that are out there that are right here in this community when they're filled?
There's a training going on tomorrow, I think, on electrical engineering jobs, like entry-level electrical engineering jobs, but that really didn't get out in the community in the way that it could have gotten out in the community. So again, that's a skilled job. All right, so we'll chew on that and bring something back for you guys to edit and refine and look at over the course of the next couple of months. We'll hopefully come up with something that feels like it is representative of the aspirations of our community. And, along with this, again, this is just the website. There's also those things that are happening in the community where we want to really help connect you with things that are already self-organized in ways that you won't have an opportunity to engage community members around their shared aspirations and be able to hear from that. And hopefully that will help influence and inform what we're doing as we go forward. Any other questions or comments?
One thing I think is, looking at the budget stuff, I think it's been along for years, I think, maybe in the park, Rouse Park, that y'all have helped other counties, like their departments, better in their ways, so there would be something we gotta help. That's, that way. Totally, and that's, I think that's right.
We don't have to invent the wheel every time.
And I think if you look at a great example of how we've engaged business is the way that restaurants have engaged in domestic violence prevention. Or, most restaurants you walk into now, you'll see a sign that says, are you on a date, are you safe, if you need help, tell Tracy at the bar. I mean, those are opportunities that aren't high cost, but they engage with families and you good?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take down sheets, put up sheets. Ready to bring it on? You wanted it, are you good chair rolling on or you want a break?
Keep going.
Go good?
People are, take a break.
We wanted to, spend just a little bit of time in just a discussion about, we just came off that 18 budget. What worked well for you all in that process? What do you wish you had more of or less of, or what format, or what timeline? And then Diane has made the point to us, we pretty much use the same process for the last decade. So
I've been here 14 years, and it's been the same process, and I think it's served us okay in the past, but I kind of get the sense I would like to have a different timeline or different information.
I think Diane's going to hear and kind of bring you back a revised model for how budget process might work based on what we hear from you today. And just what worked for you, what didn't work for you, what you want more of or less of. I heard informally from some of you the scheduled retreat, not all department heads actually had time to share. Would you like to hear from them throughout the year? Would you like to see them come into work sessions or into commissioners meeting, or do you want to schedule all of that in a budget block? So just the opportunity to hear from you all and what you feel like you need to feel comfortable when it's time to vote on the budget. If it was perfect, it's amazing.
Perfect example. I've been to food files, and I've had surprises at the end of everything. And that's something that I'll definitely want to get away from. I want to know exactly what we're doing before I walk in the door. And that's it. That's the most important thing. Surprises is what.
Most important thing to me, being the first time, was trying to go through the nonprofit and sitting there seeing if they're asking for 300 and then here, they're going to be satisfied with 75. Give us the number you want and need, not no used car sales.
Here you go again.
Talk about Friday.
I agree with Robert. Coming in, I guess this is where my financial background comes in. When you do a budget, you spend the most time on the most important parts of the budget. Now, I'm not saying nonprofits are not important, because let's face it, I've been on probably every board in Buncombe County. I realize the importance of it. But we spend a lot of time on what's a small part of the budget. We can serve these nonprofits, I do believe, the same way, but not use as much time as we do. It's got to be a more efficient process of doing that. Because what we got is not. Yeah, it's just too bulky. I mean, it's,
Well,
yeah.
and for 6 years, we've spent this endless amount of time talking about not-for-profits, where we end up with the same result pretty much in that. And I'm just gonna say, I think it was done deliberately, so we get the most out of it.
Moving forward, I'd like to, I think it would be really neat, we've had some organic conversation about this, but if we looked at ways that community granting process could be clearer and more transparent to nonprofits, but also be more tightly aligned with policy priority areas. So that if we're really pushing on racial equity issues or addiction issues, that we're highlighting those as priority funding areas. And I'd also like to throw out there introducing some guidelines related to the number of years we might fund or criteria or amounts or just things like that, just to provide a lot more. In my day job, I write nonprofit grants, and I know that when a funder doesn't provide, or the more information a funder provides about what priorities are, the easier it makes their job, and they can discern whether to fit to apply and be much more precise about requests. So that's something that if there's an appetite for that, I'd really love to be part of that conversation.
I think I could agree more.
Yeah, I agree.
I think what was frustrating, especially this year, the numbers kept changing, by millions of dollars. And that was frustrating and discouraging and, very.
So, along the way, some of what we've heard is that sometimes you saw expenditures but never saw the revenues tied to those, so it was harder to get to what's the net county investment around the line item.
And it's almost like we wait to the last minute to do the budget. You know, this is something that should be built over the year. I mean, we just don't say do it in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever. But this is something that we set up the dashboard right and see where we are month to month or whatever, year to date with our current budget. It should make life a lot easier for us when we start working on the next year. And I want to make sure that we see the whole budget, you know, soon. You know, if we're doing it right, you know, we
Even
have.
the line item details that
We
they
have the
invest.
information, yeah, I want to see the line item, you know, I want to know what's going on. I don't like the executive summary of the budget.
It's like we're going to anywhere that,
Yeah.
the other sessions that we had. Let's do it, have it laid out, and then we all have an understanding.
We did.
It didn't happen.
We started earlier, but we didn't start early enough.
Right.
You know, so I agree with all that. I think we need to start, I think we need to, throughout the year, we need more updates, and then when we do get into the budget season itself, it needs to start really in April, I think, instead of May. And like the one work session we had, it was good, but it was still just way, we didn't have enough time. And then we had department heads of big departments, you know, having 10 minutes to kind of get up and talk. And it was good, but like there was just not nearly enough time. So I think we need to just carve out more time for that. We can't do it all in one day. And part of it too is, you know, you have a meeting like that, and then you think a lot of questions after the meeting. And so like you need to have a work session like that and then have a chance to come back to it. Because it's almost like the second time you talk about it, it's going to be more meaningful than the first time. So we just got to dedicate more time to
But
it.
in the hearings from departments throughout the year, and then feeling comfortable telling us what is going on, and not being worried, you know, just having a much higher comfort level. And in the back of the if we look at our priorities now, where we're going as a community, and then it's going to call it the YW. The programs the YW has for what the needs are of our community are extraordinary. And if you compare the total number in the budget to the minimal amount they asked for, it's, you know, I would like to fund those programs more so we can put in our priorities what we are trying to fix through nonprofit work. To me, it makes good sense.
I think the earlier in the calendar year is not a challenge. Department budgets are in the January. I mean,
We started in October with capital IT requests, so I think the key is just to review earlier and show you the results of what people were asked for and the impact that would be, whether you pay hours at it. Typically, for nonprofits, you know, there's some flexibility on certain timeframes, some are set by statute, and once you get later on in your schools and the budget message.
And
I think there's a lot of flexibility.
And like right now, we have apparently a lot of revenue from federal prisoners, but we've never been shown a clear outline of the income of that. Are they all inclusive? I mean, is the federal government paying for all their needs? Is the jail budgeted to be full all the time and is it separate? You know, the one time we hear 3.6 million, I mean, just all these numbers are out there, nothing. So how do you make a decision, based on these numbers?
So really tying the revenues to the expenditure and seeing how that flows.
What is the revenue? Or is it in, or is it down?
Well,
Does it go back to that, or is it utilized in basically the general fund? That's, you know, there's questions. Every department has a budget. You got a budget, y'all have a budget.
It's a lot smaller to use.
But it's like.
This is all smart, right?
It's like.
Jim's got the budget.
Jim's got
But it's like it's like, you know, the active police cars. I mean, I think it would be more, more sustainable to know what the need is, what the criteria is, show that. And not that we need to micromanage it, but it'd be nice to know.
So fleet management's one of the things that came up, but you know, I'm more hear you saying there's drill down, you want specific areas to understand as well, like the revenue around the we can, I mean, I think Autumn's been working on this for that. We can get that.
That would be really good, that's a really good dashboard
Yeah.
thing to do. We have that information, it's just a matter of
Have a budget.
tracking it, projecting it. That would be an easy.
And the landfill is another one.
The landfill
Has a lot of money where deep goes back to, you know, top of the dryer and it's
Right,
replacing.
so solid waste is a business unit all itself, so no money goes in or out of it, it's a
It all stays.
But certainly, we can do a much better job of reporting how that money is, where it's, reserved, yeah. I mean,
Yeah, when something breaks, it's not, you know, to go to AutoZone and pick it up for $14.95. Go to CAD, pay $25,000.
I think you're kind of making the point too, how does an enterprise fund work if we're doing funds
All that.
supported?
But there's a big piece of financial transparency that we really are, there's a state initiative on that as well, that we're very much going to piggyback off of that state initiative.
And I'll tell you, a good one for me is, since I'm a representative on that, economic development. I mean, what we have hanging out there as far as, you know, incentives if we hope or if they meet their goals, you know, I've never been able to get my hands around the amount the liability we have out there. On the other hand, I'm not sure I know how much we budget. We budget so much to spend a year for economic development or what? It's still fuzzy to me being new.
We had economic development on for the 25th and have a similar dashboard format to bring you that shows
Oh, good.
obligations.
Okay.
It's kind of like that. In part, you're paying for investment decisions from prior boards. And then what capacity is available to you. And we think a good time to look at your policy. It doesn't address what, I mean, it may be exactly that on one board.
So we're gonna do that 2 weeks from now?
Does that work? That was one
Good,
thing.
yeah,
That'd be great.
fine.
We heard
That's
community development and economic development
Okay,
were
good.
high priorities for
Good.
the next work session.
Good.
There were two specific things that came up this year. It might have been outliers, but one was that there's a lot of confusion about whether the community grants were going to be made at the discretion of commissioners or HHS. And that's where ping pong back and forth several times. So just clarity on that piece is then.
Community contracts versus community grants.
I'm sorry,
Is
I said that
correct?
wrong. Yes, the contracts versus the grant. Just, that was just one thing. And another thing that came up was that related to the ways that new initiatives were being presented, sometimes they were built into departmental budgets and sometimes they were presented as
It's really
Or
different.
do they end up looking duplicated at times?
Right.
It just was very hard to kind of keep track of that.
Well, and I know you don't have it in front of you, and we'll bring it, when we do the follow-up on it, but how the budget got presented to you, is really not departmental based, so you might see Family Justice Center, which is a Health and Human Service Program in public safety, or child support, which is a HHS program by law. I mean, do you want to see it more departmental? And it tended to blend for you, all of the support departments, finance, IT. Do you want to see those buckets and really understand how much is invested in that infrastructure?
I think having it by department is less confusing. And also, if I was somebody using the Family Justice Center, I might feel about having that.
We heard that from partners, and it's not probably the same programs. Anything else you want us to focus on?
One thing that I liked this year that it seemed like there was more information on than previous budgets was some of the kind of multi-year forecasts. You know, maybe it's because it was a revaluation year, because we're trying to understand, all right, if you change the you lower the rate, you know, not just how does this work for this year, but how likely is this going to work for several years in the future? I thought there was more information on that, and that was really useful, and I think we need more of that, because it really just kind of emphasized to me that it's really not, I mean, you can almost make anything work for 12 months, but like, what are we doing for the next few years? Because we don't want to be just, you know, going up and down with the tax rate every year. That's stressful for everybody. So I think we're trying to sort of set rates that you know, may need to be changed, but hopefully can largely work. So more of that both on the revenue side and the expense side, I think is good. That's kind of part of really like the whole debt. You know, how does the debt load change over time? Does that help us out some? So more of that kind of information. And then related to that too, you know, this kind of looking at the fund balance and the fund balance forecast too, that was really kind of impressed upon me more this year. That's kind of a, you know, that's obviously just a key number. I think we're going to need to look at our fund balance policy. I think we're probably going to need to consider modifying it because we need, and I thought it was a good discussion we had earlier this year around that. So just my 2 cents on it is, you know, we need to stay way above what the state requires, but I think our current number seems probably sort of arbitrarily high, and so I think we should probably look at that, because we want to comply with whatever our policy is, but I don't know that our current policy is what we need for the next 4 years, so I'd like to look at that question.
Well, I think the thing is, I think can we go back as a group of us, when we change that to 12, and have a judgment.
That's right.
You know, this is below.
Commissioner Whiteside raised that point. At what point is it money that would better serve the economy to go back to?
Yeah, because, you know, if you keep it too high, 19%, is that fair that's not fair to our constituents? You know, they're paying more than they need to be paying. That's the game.
And I think it's going to go down. I mean, I think with the tax rate we set, I mean, I think the forecast show it's going to go down, and that's okay because we do have. I think it probably is higher than it has to be, but we got to watch it carefully and make sure we stay. What is the floor? You know.
And I think there's more openness. Like, you know, if somebody says to Connie and I, you know, we want to do this, then I think we share that with everybody, not just you, and let us be our own messengers. You know, county staff shouldn't be in the position of trying to talk other commissioners into different projects. It should be me like, you know, we shouldn't be messengers to that.
And let us do the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
This is kind of more of a detailed thing, but just one last thing I'll just throw out is, you know, there's our fund balance. There's also, you know, one of the other things that felt very rushed at the end of the whole process was the school fund balance question and the school funding. So, and I thought we came to a great compromise with the schools over their budget, but I think we shouldn't wait until we're way into the next budget cycle to kind of talk about it again, because they're still carrying a balance, and And we need to think through what everyone's comfortable with in terms of using that, so we're not in the pressure of the budget. And instead of arguing about what the schools really need, we're arguing about how much fund balance they have, right? So I think we should just, over the coming 6 months or 9 months, we should just have a couple of meetings with them to kind of talk it through and
Like joint board work sessions?
I don't think it needs to be everybody, but I think with some of our finance staff and maybe, a couple of board members from each body, to sit down and kind of have an ad hoc group to think about that so that that's, we just figure that piece out before we get into the budget process itself.
That's like Mandy's talking, because you're going to get Lady Tech, trustee, I want to have Greg on his side and watch what's going on. Bring 2 other trustees in, take 2 commissioners. Do the same thing with the schools. Take 2 commissioners, take like Robert, Jasmine, yourself, Al, or Ellen, whoever you pick in the process. That way they can go in, it's not cold through. And, that's what I'd like to do. What Mandy's brought forward and maybe Tech for the building, trying to do construction monies, forcing sales tax, and what needs to be fixed. We'll go to a couple of the trustees, and the trustees have an idea exactly what Greg wants to do. And then I'm going to go to commissioner support, make sure that things, hopefully things can be done. So,
The same thing with the fire.
Yeah, there is more data available on that would be helpful in that kind of discussion too. I don't know how your daily dashboard on the budget works for you, but the one that shows, yeah.
Budget actuals, sort of basically.
Yes, I'm sure it was built grade 10. It doesn't say a lot. It's giving it showing you don't really know why, but it may work for you. I mean, you all don't, we do. And a lot of that's just the way expenditures happen. Do y'all not still get it every day?
We don't get it every day.
They used to get it once a week.
Once a week.
You know what you might want to see that tells you a little more, to the chair's point about projections and where we are budget to actual in the course of the year.
We don't get it anymore.
It may be a good time to just to read.
Well, it's obviously not rocking the world. I get up and say I'm making every decision.
I mean, it's probably worth the discussion. What is that once a week update that you would like to see? I mean, what would be a good once a week thing that would sort of keep you up to speed on? Yeah.
I think one of the things that came up in the year, this year, is, we're a large organization with a large budget, and we do in most years, as you saw, fund balance trend in good shape. Who makes the decisions about how that end of year, that's not been something that's come to the board this way. Okay, here's some one-time expenditures you can do with the closeout of fiscal year 17. I think Brian and I plan to bring that to you this year. But that's the point that I heard from you all is what happens when we not only make up the fund balance we budgeted, but we have additional in-year revenues left. How do you all weigh in on how you want to see, whether that's paying off debt, dealing with one-time expenditures, going into fund balance? This ought to be y'all's decisions, how that plays out. Anything else?
One of the other things too, that I just, it's not just this year, but kind of, and I think we did spend some more time, to me it felt like some more time looking at the fund balance stuff this year, and partly because again, I think it's kind of looking at, the next few years and reevaluation. But, just how we usually